Hey, thanks for coming out on short notice. Thank you so much for putting the word out. Literally out of breath from like running 10 minutes ago. So sad. So have you guys been to any clinics before? Any of you? No? All right. And I heard that Yeti did one. Jay Redding.
Yeah.
He's one of my heroes. He's arguably the best putter in the world. There's probably 3 people you can make the argument for, Yeti being one of them. I took a private lesson from Yeti, so I'm a big fan of trying to learn still. So what I did at the clinics is I'm going to talk about the backhand, sidearm, and putting. Those are kind of the 3 most important parts of the game. So sad. I'm going to start with the backhand. So the first thing I can talk about with the backhand is grip. There's 3 basic types of grips, and I believe that all 3 of these grips are effective. With most things, I believe there's like a right way and a wrong way to do things. With the grips, there's not ever going to be one correct way to grip because we all get different shaped hands, and we all prefer different discs to different grams and shapes. So there's not one correct grip. There's the fan grip, which is all 4 fingers open underneath. There's the pinch grip, which is the 4 fingers in, but the fingernails still up, and there's the power grip with all 4 fingers underneath. I believe all 3 grips, all those grips would be effective, whichever one's going to feel best for you. But there's a couple things that they have in common. First is you always want to use all 4 fingers for your grip. So unlike, say, a 3-finger grip with the pinky off the rim, or a grip with the index finger on the rim, this is just a 3-finger grip. This finger's not doing anything sitting here. You want to grip with all 4 fingers. The second thing you want to do is on top of the disc is you want your thumb to use the underside wing of the disc to allow you to grip. So you don't want to be dependent just on friction with the thumb. So what you want to do is you want to take your thumb, put it on the disc, you want to slide it forward and gripping tight, you want to slide it forward until the lip of the disc is going to catch your finger. On a wide wing disc, you're going to have a slightly different thumb placement than on a short wing disc because you want to be up to that lip. After the grip, everything's going to come down to 2 basic ideas, and I'm going to keep kind of harping on these 2 points. This is the most important thing. The first is everything is linear, and what I mean by that is everything you're going to do is going to be directly towards the direction you're throwing, or a couple points will be 180 degrees opposite from the direction you're throwing, but everything's going to be on that line. The reason why it's going to be important to stay on that line is I just kind of thought of this analogy like a few minutes ago, is the game of darts, right? A game that is nothing about aim. And with darts, everything is towards the target, away from the target, towards the target. Anything you did to come off that line is going to hurt your ability to aim. Rotating, twisting, bending, angles, anything. It's away from the target, towards the target. So I'm going to keep coming back to that idea of keeping everything on that line. Now what's important is that line is not where the disc is going to be landing. You can forget where the target is, and you can also forget the direction of the tee pad as well. The tee pad will normally point towards the target, but that's rarely the direction you're throwing. You want to be lined up the direction you're aiming, where the disc is going to be heading towards, not where it's going to land. So for example, if I was throwing a shot that was going to be left of these shrubs here, but I was throwing to the right of this overhanging branch, everything's going to line up towards the right of the overhanging branch, not where it's going to line up. The whole throw is going to, so the next thing I'll talk about is the run-up. The throw is executed in the final 3 steps. I'm sorry, back up. I said there's 2 things that are important I'm going to talk about. One is everything linear, and the second is about simplifying everything. And that's why I thought of the darts analogy as well either. Darts is 1, 2, 3. Billiards, 1, 2, 3. There's nothing else. Golf, 1, 2, 3. Right? Keeping everything simple as possible. So I'm going to keep coming back to the idea of linear and keeping everything in the throw as simple as possible. 1, 2, 3. So along that line is the run-up. Now the run-up is going to come down to your final 3 steps. You can add steps before that to gain momentum, but it's the final 3 steps where the throw is going to happen. And those 3 steps are going to be exactly, again, linear in the direction you're going to be throwing. Is the first step is directly towards the direction you're throwing in that line. The second step is the X step, which I think most people are familiar with these days, which is where you slide behind, but the slide behind the direction you're throwing. And the third step is going to keep on that direction. It's going to be 1, 2, 3. If you add steps before the run-up, for instance, like I like to add a couple steps to get momentum, which is okay. But a 5-step run-up is not 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. A 5-step run-up would be 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. A 10-step run-up would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, because it's the final 3 steps where the throw happens. So, along with those 3 steps, the disc is also going to do 3 things, 3 steps as well, that are going to correspond somewhat with the 3 footsteps, 1, 2, 3. First step, set the disc out at the point of release. I think of it the same way. I can keep going to other sports analogies, but I think of it like in ball golf. You start, you address the ball where you're going to hit it. That's where the swing starts. If it starts, you start where you release it. So the same thing here. Start the disc off at the point of release. That's 1. You also want to, when you set the disc, is you want to set the angle of the disc at the angle you're going to be releasing. So for example, if you're going to be throwing a shot with this angle on the disc, you don't want to start here and then at some point have to figure out where to put the angle on. Start the disc at the angle you want to throw, then you don't have to deviate from that. So, first step, step 1, set the angle, and set the disc at the point of release. From here, I think of, I call it the slingshot technique. Slingshot, where you take the slingshot, you take it, you pull it back, 180 degrees from where you're aiming, you let go, straight back towards where you're aiming. Well, think of it the same way with your backswing on the throw. So you start off with the handle of the slingshot, that's 1. Second step, during the X step, you pull the disc back 180 degrees in a line from the direction you're going to be throwing. That's drawing the slingshot back. Now just like a slingshot, when you get to this point of the throw right here, you should be pointing with your hand through your shoulder exactly the direction you're going to be throwing. Again, I just think of it like a slingshot. If you look down the thing of a slingshot, you can see exactly where it's going to go. Well, if you were to freeze frame at this point right here, you should see exactly where the throw is going to go. And with most people, that's exactly where the throw goes. I've done a lot of private lessons where I videotape people from behind, and as they're throwing the shot, I'm saying quietly to the camera, right, left. Very easily tell where the shot's going to go because they're pointing right where it's going to go. So you're walking the direction you're going to be throwing, pull the disc back 180 degrees to the point direction you're throwing. And everything's linear. The third step is to pull through. If you're releasing the slingshot, pull the disc in a straight line again. And this doesn't happen at the same time. It's just that step happens first, which we all do naturally. We don't do that. So I don't need to explain that, but it's step, pull the disc back in a straight line. Now, this is one of the several misconceptions that unfortunately I still see people writing about, and that is that you want to pull the disc across your chest. Forget about that. That's completely incorrect. What you want to do is instead think about pulling the disc in a straight line. If I was throwing a low flat shot, the disc just happened to be pulled across my chest. But if I was throwing a shot over these trees, a big hyzer shot, I would pull the disc in a straight line, but it's not going to go over my chest. It's going to come across here. I'm not trying to pull across here. It's going to pull in a straight line. If you're throwing a roller is going to go in a straight line this way. So forget about pulling it across your chest. I never know where to fit this in, so I just kind of throw it wherever. You will be using your wrist on the throw, but with your wrist, you're definitely going to be using the wrist, but you want to be using your wrist like a spring and not like a hinge. And what I mean by that is the wrist will be used, but if it was a hinge, it would involve taking your wrist, bending it backwards, and then using your wrist to propel the disc. That's not what you want to do. If your backswing looks like this, it's wrong. Your backswing should look like this with your wrist straight, because your wrist is going to be like a spring. The way I like to think of it is, if you line your wrist up with your forearm and you try to hold it there, if you were to tie a string to your fingers and pull hard enough, even though you're trying to keep your wrist straight, if you pull hard enough, it's going to bend. But if I'm trying to keep it straight and I let go, it snaps back into place. The wrist is doing that motion, but it's from here being pulled back and snapping back into place. Where that applies to the throw is you want to keep your wrist straight here. As you accelerate, you're keeping your wrist straight. The wrist will bend, but you're trying to keep it straight. At the point where your arm changes direction, your wrist will snap back into place forward. So the wrist gets used, but it's not like consciously using it. Keeping it straight You don't have to think about your wrist. As long as you think about keeping it straight, this will happen naturally. I cover a lot of stuff really quickly, by the way. Hope you're in line. So, let me stop a second. Are there any questions?
So,
Yes.
is that primarily where the snap comes from? Is from that little spring action of the wrist?
The snap, okay, so the snap, when you're referring to snap, is not the sound of a snap. Like some players throw, like sometimes when I throw, you hear like a snapping sound. That's not what snap is. I'm not saying that that's what you're saying. Snap is just referring to spin. The spin happens from everything, the timing of everything happening in order. The throw and where power comes from is like cracking a whip. If you were to take a whip in your hand and you do this with it, this motion right here is only going like 20 or 30 miles an hour, right? But as you do this, the whip it's speeding up faster and faster until the end it actually breaks sound breaker, right? The speed of sound, because everything happens sequentially. It's going faster and faster to the end of the whip. Well, the same thing happens. That's where snap comes from. It comes from the timing of your feet, hip, shoulder, elbow, and wrist happening in order. So this is the handle of the whip. This is the tip of the whip. And when it happens sequentially in order, which again most of us do it happens naturally, that they go in order, but the better the timing is, that's where the more spin comes from. With the backhand, you don't have to consciously spin the disc. And I mentioned this because with the sidearm, it's going to be completely opposite. But with the backhand, the spin just happens naturally. That's why that's frisbee, because the spin happens. Like get off track with the answer.
Oh yeah, that answers it.
Okay. So I can demonstrate. We've got some mid-ranges. We've got a couple. So if I was throwing in a straight line down the road, so it's 2 steps, then 1, 2, 3, like a slingshot. So it's 1, 2, slingshot, back. Trying not to hit anybody's car. The sidearm's a lot more accurate.
Yeah, watch that red Honda down there.
It's fatal. I'll hit the pickup truck first.
Sticking out.
Okay. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. Back up to try to avoid the car. Any questions about the back end?